Hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you on Tuesday, July 18th. For any of you Red Sox fans out there, that also happens to be Mike Greenwell's birthday, my favorite baseball players growing up. And anyways, today, video I'm really excited about because there was a Jim Rogers interview posted this morning that I've gotten to listen to twice. I'm guessing you might be familiar with Jim Rogers. If not, he's one of the legendary investors, has become an author, big commodities guy, had a lot of success. I believe it was the Quantum Fund that he was a part of. Certainly worth looking on Wikipedia or YouTube. And also, Jim has been talking for years about silver, the growing problems that he sees in the economy. So, I think it's helpful to dig into some of the great comments Jim had, because again, I don't want you to think, that it's just me. I'm the only one who's seeing this. Remember towards the end of my time on Wall Street, it seems as if people thought maybe I woke up with a gold bar in my baby crib and had some predestination to be inclined towards precious metals, which really isn't the case, but rather just, for me, it started with sitting on the trading floor watching the entire world collapse in 2007, 2008, 2009, thinking about how, here it was, I'd worked for a couple different financial shops, gone to business school, and it just struck me as odd that I, theoretically the kind of person that was trained to see this, and I came to realize that a lot of the things that we're presented with and the typical system is designed so that we don't see these things. But Jim was one of the ones, I believe he was talking about the housing bubble before it collapsed. But I became more familiar with him as I studied the people who had seen the problems in advance, and always found Jim to be an interesting guy. Actually, I had the pleasure of meeting him a couple times because he used to come by the New York Stock Exchange to give his interviews on CNBC. And I remember it was after QE2, which was one of the Federal Reserve's money printing programs. He stopped by, and I believe that was the first time I met him. And he pulled out a silver coin and was saying, "Buy silver." And it was nice because by that time I had started really researching silver more and was on board with that. And I'd say that was maybe back in 2011. Of course, it has been a rocky time for silver since then, but we're going to dig into some of Jim's comments because, again, I think he provides great perspective, which, as I've thought more and more about what can I really offer in these videos that is of help to someone, is less buy this or buy that, and Jim had some great comments on that whole philosophy as well, but more just educating so that you can see things that are out there, and by all means, don't do anything just because you heard me say it. I've been investing in silver the last couple of years, and it's been not such good times. I think that all the evidence that I find supports a good case of why I believe it'll go higher, and that's what a lot of these videos are about, or at least walking you through that. And maybe you'll agree, maybe not, but hopefully providing a good framework. And with that said, one of the things that Jim mentioned several times in his interview is invest in what you know. And he said, stay with what you know, which I think is really great advice. He had a funny way of phrasing it, saying, if you can't find China on a map, don't invest in China, because he was talking about how he sees a shift of power from the U.S., which this massive debt pile has been growing. And in the link below the video on the YouTube page, I've attached a chart of the U.S. debt and also of the balance sheet, basically how much money the Federal Reserve has printed. So you can see, again, why so many people keep talking about, is there a problem coming on the horizon? Because when you actually look at these charts and see the escalation where, imagine if one day, you're $10,000 in debt, and then you go to Vegas, you double down, borrow some money, then you're $20,000. Then 50,000, then a million, then, at some point, if your number just becomes out of proportion to what you really have the means to generate, and when, it's gone on for so long, and people have just gotten so used to Congress saying, well, next year we'll do it, but similar with the housing bubble, eventually these things get resolved. It can be tricky trying to figure out when, but anyway, you can look at those charts for yourself, and by all means, it's not up to me to decide whether the U.S. can actually pay this back, or if there even is a possible way for Trump to make America great again without basically acknowledging that this system that we're on of these paper currencies that are printed and run by the banks, yeah, you could make America great again if you tear all this down, or stop putting bank executives into the Treasury, or audit the Federal Reserve and do some real accounting. But anyway, this is the area that I've studied a lot. I've found the monetary policy and really understanding and doing a little investigation into how so much of the typical Wall Street works that has led me to silver. Again, Jim sees these trends and he focuses on China a lot. I believe he also lives in Singapore. He's teaching his daughters Mandarin. I don't know if he's moved to China since then, but again, he mentions investing in China because that's something he's familiar with. Another area that he talks about is agriculture, which I should have mentioned. Well, I guess there's no such thing as should. We're all exactly where we're meant to be, but might have been a good add-on to yesterday's video of what are some of the other things that could be a good investment that incorporates the future. And Jim has been talking about agriculture for years. I remember that was one of the reasons I first started thinking of it more. I guess it was probably 5 or 6 years ago. I remember used to always hearing him say the average age of a farmer is 58 or 68 years old. So in 10 years, there's, and certainly if we have a problem with the currency where things aren't functioning as much and people go back to what are the essentials for living and functioning in society, obviously food is a key one to start with. So agriculture can be a good investment. Is it the right investment for you? Well, I don't know the answer to that, but we'll take what Jim said where, if you don't like being out in the sun and you've never grown anything in your entire life, then probably not. Similar, I think Bitcoin, I've started purchasing some cryptocurrencies. I have some level of familiarity with it. I've been studying and learning a lot. Now, if you've never heard of a Bitcoin or don't understand anything about it, then it's probably not a good investment because there's different profiles for each thing. Yet, if you're a coder and you're working in tech and you want to get into Bitcoin, or you see some sort of business idea that you think, well, here's where I see the world going and here is what might happen and this is a good investment given that, by all means, that makes it more suitable. But Jim kept mentioning just the invest in what you know. Now, maybe you study silver and you think I'm completely nuts and I'm looking at the wrong data, and you think silver is going to go down, then by all means, if that's your belief, then go for that. Just, I think, Jim, I think you get the point. But whatever you become knowledgeable about and have studied, certainly a good place to start. Then you can incorporate in whatever fashion the bigger trends. One of the things Jim mentioned is that he has a lot of money in cash. So you don't always have to be going full bore. Maybe you don't see anything you like right now, and that's okay too. Another thing Jim mentioned that I think is a great point is that let's say there is a break point, markets get repriced. Now he is in agreement and is a fan of owning precious metals, yet points out that they could go lower first. I don't know. Do the mining stocks get crushed if the whole market is going down. Anything is possible, and perhaps before making any decisions, it's always helpful to realize these are different probabilities you're pricing. We don't know anything for sure, and I think a lot of people have been investing in precious metals for a while. Certainly, if they saw the money printing that began in 2008, and again, it's really worth taking a look at that chart. It's stunning, the magnitude, and I saw that, bought gold and silver, and for a while into 2011 was looking great. And then they got crushed, which I think we've clearly seen and documented, and Deutsche Bank and CFTC have had confessions and admissions that it was a manipulation. Yet at the end of the day, you had your view, you can be right, and the markets can still go in an opposite direction, especially in the short term, which is why, again, that's what I like so much about silver, especially if you're just, you have you have some extra money at the end, you pay your expenses, live your life, do what you do each month. And if you're thinking about what can I just put there that at some point in time I think works in my favor, and just eliminate the intraday worrying whether it goes up or down, but if you're basing something on fundamentals, then I think it can take a lot of the stress out of it. The idea that people have to be monitoring their portfolio just because we have an app on a cell phone, or treating it like the same way they analyze the Super Bowl, just constant. If you experienced short-term trader and you have some sort of process that works, then go for that. Again, I based my decisions on the thing that seemed as clear to me as possible, was at some point this cycle of bubbles and what we've done since then is going to lead to a certain outcome, and which, if I have time on my side, can really make it a lot easier to handle. So, again, Jim mentioned that there could still be a flight to the dollar and a flight to the treasuries at some point as these things begin to unfold. We saw that last time, which, it's almost insane that as you see, if you took the name off it and just looked at the profile of the U.S. corporate entity, aside from the fact that so many people are used to saying, well, we're the U.S., it's the dollar. That quick funny tangent here. I'd say it was back in 2009 where I started seeing an alternate view of how all of this works. And I remember it was so stunning in the beginning. I kept thinking, I've got to be missing something. It couldn't be this way, that this elephant is right here in the room and yet nobody else is seeing it. And just me. Fortunately, it wasn't just me, but it often felt like it. And if you're out there feeling like, well, maybe what this guy's saying is making sense, yet you walk down the street and everyone's in a different reality, that's exactly what it felt like. And I used to wonder if I was missing something till, I would talk to my boss or different people that I knew or worked with in Wall Street. And really the only counter to what I was saying that I ever heard was that, well, we're the U.S., these things don't happen here. Okay, so, we printed a lot of money since then. If interest rates do this, the debt's building. How do you see it all getting resolved? I don't know, but it doesn't happen in the U.S. So, which is one of the quirky variables that makes the financial market so interesting, in that if you had some sort of chaos tomorrow, there probably would be a rush into the dollars and the treasury. In the same way there's been a rush back into stocks and bonds and real estate over these past couple years. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily what I would think of as logical, or maybe it is logical, but again, that's why understanding your time frame and, like Jim said, investing in the things okay, you understand the things that anything's possible in the short term, but if you're planning. Again, my strength to me is thinking about some of the bigger economic trends, doing these for the longer term. Takes a lot of the, moves a lot of the decision making, which I think for any of you meditators out there, it's almost not overthinking things and just making the whole process simpler. Because these things can happen in the short term, whatever we define the short term as, yet certainly you look at how things would almost have to be resolved in the longer term. And anyway, I think you get the point there. Just a few more comments here. Again, we talked about a little bit yesterday. Jim touches on a bit of just investing. Again, when he says, "and what you know could be your own skills." If you have a business idea, again, I'd say that maybe might be a better alternative than silver for you. If you have a different perspective on silver, or maybe none of this stuff makes any sense, that's fine. Is what I spend a lot of my time doing, thinking with the skills that I have and what I see happening in the world, how can I best use these to make a life that I enjoy living? So, with that said, we'll wrap this up here, and perhaps with one or maybe two quick last comments here. Jim said at the end, be careful, because sometime in the next couple of years, things are going to happen, and be informed, because when you become knowledgeable, you probably will be worried and freaked out at the beginning. I think that's normal. It took several years for me to see these things differently, and rather than fearing what would happen, seeing a different perspective now, where maybe Bitcoin becomes a currency, but seeing that things are being developed so we can transition to something that's more freedom-based, more honest. Again, I talked with a Bitcoin friend yesterday, and while I'm far from a Bitcoin expert, just hearing the way people speak about it, I noticed I've never heard someone who really understands Bitcoin who didn't just gush about what's possible and how the open source coding, which again, hopefully I'm not extrapolating too far here, but maybe one example would be, rather than having a system that in many ways to me appears fraudulent with the way some of the metals are traded now, one of the cryptocurrencies I hear is now aimed at replacing the infrastructure of the Jamaican Stock Exchange, where you can see all the trades. You can see what's actually happening in a fair manner. So people are finding solutions. I think that's the good thing, and I think we can pull through. But I guess the last part Jim mentioned is that you'll become worried, but then you will become prepared, and we do come out of these things. Life always does go on. I think there's the potential to be a much better, healthier, productive system that really is based on people going out, doing something they enjoy, sharing it, having a good economy that grows rather than crashes every couple of years. And we'll do what we can to help you get there. So also the link to Jim's interview is below, worth checking out. With that said, hope you're having a great afternoon there, and we will see you tomorrow.